Welcome to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. Are you ready to discover some niche business ideas that actually work? Well, it's time for a motivational kick to jumpstart your next big idea. Here's your host, Spencer Haas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Haas from nichepursuits.com. And we're ready to do another awesome episode here. We've got a guest with us. His name is Jock Purtle from digitalexits.com. Jock, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Spencer. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you on. And of course, I have Perrin with me as my co-host. Perrin, how you doing?
Pretty good. I thought you forgot about me. I always
no, I never never forget. You're my trusty assistant here. So
that's right.
Jock and I met at Rhodium weekend. Oh, what has it been now? Almost a month ago, something like that. And a really great conference that focused primarily on buying and selling websites. And this is something that Jock is an expert in, as he does brokering of website sales as well. And so we're going to pick his brain for best practices for buying and selling websites, and of course get his story along the way. So, Jock, how did you get started as an entrepreneur in the first place?
I got started. You know what? I've always been an entrepreneur. Put it that way. Had parents that owned businesses, so kind of got taught early. Actually, if I think about it, Dad tried to make me read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was like 10, and then and I never really got around to reading it till I was 18. But I could see what he was trying to do. But I used to what did I used to do? I used to buy and sell garden plants. I used to run barbecues. I bought like a container load of Indian furniture one time when I was like 14 and resold all that. So technically I've always been a hustler.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's my entrepreneurial background. So
what was your first big success? Maybe your first business that allowed you to live off of the income full time then?
Damn. All right, that's the first business that allowed me to live off the income full time. Probably when I was in university, I used to have a personal training business, and that was kind of where I learned about the internet. I guess that covered me full time. I didn't really have that many expenses when I was a uni kid, so
right.
I wasn't making a massive amount of money, but it was enough money to pay rent and pay food and pay play. So how old was I then? Probably 18. Late 18, early 19.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So let's maybe go ahead and fast forward, and why don't you just tell people what your business is now and what's bringing in the bread and butter for you now?
Sure. So Digital Exits is a online business brokerage where we help online business owners find a buyer when they want to sell their business. And so that's the reason that I was attending Rhodium weekend, and that's how we met.
Mm-hmm.
So predominantly we help people on the sell side, so selling their business. However, I also do buy side consulting as well. So we've got a job at the moment actually in Australia where we're representing a company that's just got some funding to do some acquisitions. So we've got a couple of $1 million to play with to buy some, existing sites in the Australian market. So we also do that as well.
Yeah, that's cool. So, to give people an idea, you mentioned there, a couple $1 million to play around with. The type of brokering that you're doing is, it's for larger properties, right? What's sort of the range of sites that you're usually selling?
Typically between $100,000 in valuation and $5 million. That would be the range, and I'd say the majority of the turnover of stuff that we do would be in that $100,000 to $1 million.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, and that gives people an idea. It's a little bit different than, if you're buying a site on Flippa or, for a lower price. I thought I was a high roller and bought a site for $15,000, so I just got started buying sites this year and bought a couple around that price. But so you're dealing with larger properties, bigger sites. Which is the reason why you need to have a high-touch broker such as yourself involved. So, but how did you get started in the brokering business in the first place? Sort of what led to that?
So I bought an AdSense site. It's kind of just like you. It cost me $15,000 in 2000 and late 2008, early 2009.
Okay.
And I don't know what I read, but I read something about these guys that were buying these websites and reselling them. And being the confident, young, gullible entrepreneur that I am, I'm like, sure, I can do that. So, I don't know, it probably took me 10 months worth of research before I first bought that specific website. And then held onto that for 9 months, made its money back, sold it for $20,000, and kind of have been buying and selling ever since. And then that was my introduction to brokerage, I used to look at broker listings and all that good stuff. And I did my first broker deal in 2011. And that was just purely, I was already buying and selling. It was just a natural progression. And I also might say that I come from a family business, or one of the businesses Dad owns is a valuation company. So I've been doing traditional business valuations since I was 15 or 16. So I kind of, I already had that skill set, which I think is probably the biggest barrier to entry for anyone entering the market, is understanding the accounting side of things in buying and selling businesses.
Yeah, so maybe if I can jump in here, I think this might be a good time to ask this type of question. Because you started with a relatively small site, or small in the world of brokering, about $15,000 for an AdSense site, and now you're dealing with sites up to $5 million. So I'm wondering if there are any differences in the types of sites that are worth, $15,000 or $10,000, the type of sites that Spencer and I like to buy, and these big high roller sites. Are they the same types of businesses?
Yeah. Technically, it is the same asset, except the difference is a $15,000 website isn't a business. It's just an asset, whereas a $5 million site is actually a business. So that's the main thing, or the main way that I see it. So although you might have a little contractor that might work on the site, it's not going to get its own LLC. It's not going to have, operations manager. That's probably the main differences. There's just a lot more moving parts.
For sure. And are they, is there a difference in how those sites are actually built? So there's clearly a difference in how they are run, but could it just be a bigger blog, or a blog with a bigger audience, and be worth $5 million?
It could be. There's a few examples of blogs that have sold like that. I guess probably the word is size and responsibility is probably the main differentiation. Right. If you've got a $5 million business, you just have more responsibility in terms of staff, reporting, that kind of thing. So that, it's, we're slicing, what's the term? Slicing bread, slicing,
Yeah, what is the term? I know what you're getting at. Yeah, we're splitting hairs.
Yeah, we're splitting hairs. but you know, it's just bigger. You know, bigger,
Yeah.
more moving parts.
You know, and here's maybe a related question that maybe parents trying to get at is there a type of site, you know, are you usually selling more e-commerce sites or content sites or software application businesses? You know, what types of sites, you know, as far as that sort of, you know, the few examples I gave there, are you selling?
Gotcha. Okay. Stuff at the like $1 million to $5 million range is generally going to be an e-commerce or software business as the majority.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also sell some service agencies at that price range as well. You're generally not going to get a dropship website above $1 million valuation, purely because of margins and scalability.
Right.
And then you're very unlikely to get a content-based site above $1 million valuation as well. Purely again based on scalability and like margins on advertising is very low, whereas if you're selling your own products, you can make a lot more money. Right?
Yeah. So is it maybe safe to say for people listening, if they want to get to $1 million valuation, they're probably more likely to get there if they have an e-commerce site or a software application or are selling their own product?
Correct.
Yeah. No, that's a great point for people to think about listening. So let's, I do want to talk about your own portfolio just a little bit. How many sites do you have currently, or are you looking to buy some new sites right now?
I'm at 0. I sold out of everything last year, and we've been searching for a good business for about the last year to year and a half. And that I just want to probably make a point that, you know, I spent 10 months for my first business. We've been searching for a year and a half for my current business. Like, it's a long process to find the right asset to acquire.
Right.
We actually just put down an offer the other day on a software business, and we're probably 3 weeks away from closing on that. And
awesome.
I'm actually going against the grain, but not in the traditional sense, and I'm getting back into affiliate marketing again, except I'm not starting from scratch. We've acquired an existing site in the market, and then I'm building from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm very curious about that search process that you mentioned, because I just bought my first site last week, and it was $500 and it took me about a weekend to find it. So obviously when you're buying a bigger business, there's a more of a in-depth search process. So searching for a year is a really long time, or a year and a half. So what exactly are you looking for? What makes a good deal for you?
Sure. Let's pre-frame this. If I'm going to spend like $500 to $1,000 or $1 million, or, you know, some significant amount of money, then I'm going to make sure that I've dotted my I's and crossed my T's 10 times over. So that would be a pre-frame to why it takes so long. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is I start with my own criteria. So, you know, I want to buy this very, very, very specific site. So for the software business site, I wanted a software business that had both monthly and or yearly recurring income.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted the business to be at least 5 years old. I wanted the business to be in a market that would be around in 10 years' time. I wanted the business to be still founder run, and the founder was probably a programmer, not a marketer. Mm-hmm. I wanted there to be some opportunity for growth through SEO, because, you know, that's my background. That's what I'm good at.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted an existing team in place that were already running the business. So, you know, there was very little like day-to-day management. I wanted at least 10% growth yearly for the last 3 years. And I'm trying to think what the other criteria was.
So overall, pretty picky. I mean, I can clearly see that you had a lot of requirements there, and there's not going to be a ton of businesses that come up like that.
Sure. But the reason that I'm picky is because I know that when I acquire that asset, the return on investment is going to be exponential based on my criteria. So I'm happy to wait a year and sit on my cash because I know, like, at the end of the day, this is a return on investment play. So I know that even sitting on my cash for a year, although I might be technically losing money because of inflation, interest, whatever, you know, when you do that deal, you actually make your money when you buy. So when you make your money when you buy, you know that, you know, sitting on your hands for a year, you're going to make more money doing that than doing a, 80% good deal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And let's maybe answer the unasked questions up to this point as far as, why buy a business in the first place? Why not take, I don't know how much you're going to spend, let's say $200,000. Why not take that money and invest in a brand new business? Why not create something from scratch versus, buying a website? Why are you doing that?
There's two schools of thought, especially with online businesses, because there's such low barriers to entry and they're very repeatable. So it's not very hard for me to go and set up an e-commerce store that sells, whiteboards, for example. So I'm going to go against the grain and say there are some businesses that it's better to start than buy. If the economics work out. So you need to calculate, okay, it's going to cost me X amount to start this business, and the goal is in 3 years' time, I wanted to be doing, X amount in sales. Is it going to be a better return on time and investment to buy or build? So that's kind of like the first decision. Right. Now, in the majority of cases, I'm a fan of buying, inherently because I'm good at it. I've got a track record of buying and selling stuff. And then the second thing is it's actually economically, both time and money-wise, a better return on investment. And here's why. Let's say that you wanted to buy an e-commerce store that sold whiteboards, right? It cost $200,000. It was a 2-year payback period. So after 2 years' time, assuming everything was equal, you would have a whiteboard business that made $100,000 a year after 2 years, right? And you got your money back. So you acquire the asset, pay the $200,000 at a 2 times multiple, so 2 times $100,000. And at the end of 2 years, you've got a whiteboard business that makes $100,000 a year, and you've got your money back, right? So that's your return on investment.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You then look at the build option. So you take that same $200,000 and you buy a domain name, you invest in staff, SEO, paid traffic, inventory, all of the above. And the question is, after 2 years' time, will you, A, have a whiteboard business that's making $100,000 net profit per year, and B, will you have spent $200,000 to get there? So if you look at that in that frame of mind of a time period and a time invested of money, generally buying beats out building, because it's generally going to take more than 2 years to get that whiteboard business up to $100,000 in net profit per year. Okay.
Right.
Was that explained?
It does. Yeah, it does. And I'll also sort of re-emphasize the point, that after 2 years you probably won't be making that $100,000, especially in the first year. You think about, okay, if you bought, you're going to make that $100,000. If you're building, you might be making very little. Maybe you're only making $25,000 that first year. And maybe in the second year, if you have a great year, you can grow it up to that, $100,000 mark. But then you've only made 125 overall instead of the 200 overall. So yeah, really good points. That makes sense. I'm very intrigued by the buying sites business model, which is why I've started to do it a little bit more. I have a couple of follow-up questions to your kind of big hunt for buying a business currently. How do you find good businesses to buy? What's your process? I mean, I assume that you're doing more than just looking at, broker listings.
Sure. So I use broker listings to cheat. And when I say cheat, I look at broker listings because they give you existing business models with existing, you understand the market. What's the potential, what's the margins, what's the profit, etc.
Right.
And so you use existing listings as ideas for markets to then go and search in.
That makes sense.
Right? Mm-hmm. So let's say that I had 3 listings. One of them was the whiteboard business. One of them was a software business that sold a keyword research tool. Let's just use your business as an example.
Why not? Sure.
And then the third business was an e-commerce store, and it was selling like bird feeders, pet bird products. So let's say that you resonated best with the pet bird product, business. Now, if that was a good enough deal, you might just buy that yourself. However, what that pet bird product business gives you is, all right, so this business is making $500,000 a year in sales and $100,000 a year in profit. So it gives you ideas on what other product categories there are in that business, like niche or vertical, that might also be a good target for you to, outreach to them directly. So bird feeders, there might also be, let's think of something, like maybe it's like bird feed.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that bird feeder business, 10% of their product revenue was bird feed, so that's $50,000 in sales, and they're making 50% margin on that. However, you saw that that was only a minority of the business. So then you can go and have a look at the bird feed market, and you're like, okay, this might be something that I might want to get into. And let's say you find a similar site, right, that sells bird feed only, and you email them directly, you make an offer, or you give them a call, or whatever your strategy is, and you can use that information and the margins and the financials to then acquire that business at a price under market value and get a good deal. But that's basically my mindset behind acquiring sites. I'm looking at what's already working, and then how can I get creative to acquire a site under market value that's a good fit for what I do.
Yeah, and maybe to add on to that, and I hope this isn't taking a step too far back, but I'm just thinking about how you are trying to add value to these sites that you buy. And a while ago, you mentioned that you were looking for a site where you could add value with your SEO expertise. And obviously, that's kind of a lesson we had to learn the hard way, too, for our own business. But when you're buying a site like an e-commerce store or a software business, in what ways are you looking to add value with SEO?
I'm going to answer that question in a different way. The highest leverage value increase that you can do to a website that you acquire is to increase the conversion rates. So that's the first thing that I look at. Actually, maybe that was the 10th thing in my criteria was I could improve the conversion rates, because that's
right.
That's the quickest
Gotcha.
win. That's the quickest win that you can get acquiring a site. And to be honest, most sites aren't as how do you frame this? They're not as converted as they should be. Their conversion rate optimization sucks.
Right.
In most cases, people just don't work on it, think about it, and it's a revolving process. But that's the biggest win that you can have acquiring a site. So that's the first thing you want to have a look at.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went on a tangent there, but what was the SEO question that you had for me?
Well, basically the same thing. So you said that you try, or when you were looking for a business, you were looking for something to which you could add value with SEO.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how you do that with a site that's not, say, a content-driven site. For a site that's maybe a software business or an e-commerce business, how do you apply your SEO expertise to that type of business? Is it as simple as starting a blog, or what do you do?
That's very simple. I'm trying to increase the rankings for the product pages. So for an e-commerce store, if I'm selling whiteboards, I'm trying to increase the internal page ranking for white laminine whiteboards, or whatever the product category is. And then for a software business, it's going to be the main keyword. So it might be keyword research tool. So we want to get the number one ranking for that. So it's purely based on buying keywords that I want to increase. So it's not about blogging. It's not about any of that. It's purely about acquiring links to the site, improving the domain authority, so that the product pages rank higher, it gets more search traffic, and it makes more sales.
Awesome.
That makes absolute sense. So when you're out looking at sites and deciding, whether or not you can make a deal, really I want to ask about how you're valuing a website. How can you make sure that you're getting a fair price?
You look at what the market is paying and then make a judgment based on that. So value is purely derived when a transaction occurs. So what that means is if I offer you an apple for $1 and you accept my offer of $1 for that apple, the value of that apple is $1, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to have your finger on the pulse in terms of what sites are selling for in the marketplace. So let's use real estate for an analogy. Like, you've got the real estate market locally in your town, and a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house in XYZ neighborhood is selling for between $300,000 and $340,000. So if you can buy that house for under $300,000, you're getting a good deal. If you're buying a house over $340,000, you're paying above market value, and technically you're overpaying. So same analogy works for businesses.
And so are there any, I know there is, monthly multiples that sort of are standard in using, standard they're used to value websites. For example, over at the Empire Flippers, they basically put everything up for 20 times monthly earnings. That's what they sell websites for. I actually just sold a website through them, and that's what was paid, was 20 times the monthly earnings. Is there a different standard for bigger websites, and what is that, if that's the case?
Sure. For a large business in like a corporate transaction, you're going to use a discounted cash flow valuation methodology. And if we put that in layman's terms, you're going to project the profit that the business is going to potentially make in the future, and then adjust that for the time value of money.
Right.
So, money over time depreciates. So it's an accounting equation that basically says take the current earnings of the business, project it out into the future, and then come up with a value based on that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a business in the $100,000 to $5 million range is going to be something along the lines of a multiple of earnings. Now, that's seller's discretionary earnings, so it's not a discounted cash flow or EBIT evaluation model. And I'm throwing out analogies here. You might want to have to Google them or stick a link to them, because it's going to be a little bit hard to explain.
No, that's fine.
but basically, a seller's discretionary earnings is what does the seller take home at the end of the day?
Right.
So if the business is, making $100,000 in net profit per year minus all of the expenses, not including the owner's wage, then that's technically the seller's discretionary earnings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be your valuation model. And then what the multiple is, the multiple is probably going to sit in that 2 to 3 times yearly net profit. So that's 24 to 36 months times profit.
Mm-hmm.
And then the reason that it's higher than the Empire Flipper guys is there's less risk in a larger, older business, and a purchase or a buying, you're buying a business for a return on investment. So if your return on investment is less risky, then the price that you're going to pay for that asset is going to be higher.
Right. Yep, that makes perfect sense. Absolutely. I actually want to take a step back. I'm just thinking about people listening in out there that maybe are wanting to buy a website. Maybe it's their first website. Maybe they are buying multiple websites, but they want to get a good deal. And you mentioned contacting website owners directly, something that's not listed on a marketplace somewhere. I've never done that personally. That seems like that would be a great way to find these sort of hidden gems, if you will. Can you give us any tactics for contacting people? How do you approach them? Do you literally just email them and say, hey, I may be interested in your website. Do you want to talk about it?
Pretty much. Or get them on the phone. Like if it's a deal that you really want and really know it, I generally like to get people on the phone. Purely because, people tell you stuff that they shouldn't on the phone. You can blatantly ask them, all right, how much money did you make in the last 12 months? And they'll tell you 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
Don't ask me why the phone is so incredible. Maybe I'm good at it or something. But if you blatantly ask someone, all right, so tell me what your margins are, and they're likely going to tell you.
Yep.
So that's probably my biggest tactic is if you're really keen on a deal, get them on the phone. You're going to get all the information you need, build a bit better trust, and you're going to be able to come up with a better offer. Because here's the thing. If I own a website and if I get an email out of the cold and someone asks me, tell me your traffic, tell me your earnings, I'm going to tell them to get stuffed.
Yeah.
Pretty much. But if I'm on the phone with them and they're genuine and they're asking intelligent questions, then I'm more likely to give them an answer.
Right. I mean, once you're talking to somebody, they're a real person, by their tone of voice. You can tell that they're sincere and that they're really interested. So, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you can get with somebody on the phone, I've done something smaller than that. I mean, just when I've looked at several Flippa listings, and lots of people, for whatever reason, don't use the private messages on there, but that's how I've gotten all my deals. I'll just, private message them and then ask them to get on Skype. And I've gotten with people on Skype and closed a couple of good deals, for well under what they were trying to get it originally. I don't know why, but I have to assume it's because I talked to them individually and they just trusted me a little bit more.
Right.
So overall, you've given us some good tips for how you can go out buying a website and then valuing that. I'll ask you. You're out going to buy this business. Are you just looking to grow it for a couple of years and then flip it in the future?
Yes. I come with a private equity mindset that there's a life cycle to a business,
mm-hmm.
and after I've added after I've added the value that I can add to a business, then I'm going to resell it.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's in 3 years or 10 years, like if a business is cash flowing, a decent amount of money and I don't need the equity, like I don't need the cash for another deal, then like I'm just going to let it sit in cash flow.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so when you're trying to grow this business, maybe just give us some other best practices or tips besides, you mentioned obviously trying to do some conversion rate optimization. You're going to do some SEO for top keywords. What else are you, one or two other big things that you're looking to do to grow a business?
Sure. I'm basically going to 80-20 the business and find what are the biggest levers that I can pull that are going to get the biggest results. And that's the mindset that I'm coming in with. So conversion rate optimization, massive lever. Increase search traffic, massive lever.
Mm-hmm.
Decrease some specific costs, big lever.
Mm-hmm.
80-20 your customer base to look at your highest value customers and sell more stuff to them, massive lever. Looking at your highest margin product and putting a lot more effort and energy into selling that product if it's an e-commerce store, massive lever. Specifically if you're running paid traffic to that.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Basically, and looking to increase sales is probably the biggest thing. Like, increase the top line, which is going to subsequently increase the bottom line. And I'm not worried about spending more money if I can increase the top line, which also increases the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's say everything goes well. I mean, we'll continue to just kind of use this example. You find a great site and you buy it and you grow it after 3 years. It's at a point where you feel like you can sell it for a nice profit. How do you go out finding a buyer for a property like that? And certainly you have your brokerage business where you're doing this a lot, but do you have just a pool of interested people already, or how do you find qualified buyers for sites like that?
Sure. To be honest, if you're selling in like the sub, let's say $1 million to $2 million valuation, using a broker is going to get you the highest valuation, purely because the valuation multiple isn't going to be anything higher than 2 to 3 times. That's just what the market pays.
Right.
If, however, your business is, getting larger and then can be acquired by the next level of buyer, which is going to be like a small tier private equity, small market cap, like media company, then it might be an idea to engage like a small mergers and acquisitions company. Because you're going to get a higher price.
Mm-hmm.
But for most people's sake who's listening, unless if you can sell the business strategically yourself to either a supplier or a competitor or someone where there's some synergy, you're most likely going to get the highest price from a broker because you're selling at market price.
Yeah.
So a broker's going to put it out to a whole bunch of buyers, and then because of the competition, the market's going to pay the value of what that site's worth at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that makes sense. I mean, at least 99% of the people listening probably would just want to use a broker. That's going to make the most sense. That's, what you guys do full time is you're out finding people to buy businesses like that. But specifically for digital exits, what strategies are you using to bring in buyers, to bring in viewers of your listings that you have?
To be honest, finding buyers is the easy part. There's a massive amount of demand at the moment on the buy side with a very limited amount of stock, so businesses to sell.
Mm-hmm.
So the main ways that we're getting new buyers to our list is we rank for a lot of key terms like established websites for sale, so SEO. That's number one. We rank for like website broker, so naturally people looking at listings are going to jump onto our database. We put listings onto the business for sale classified sites. So we get buyers from that buyer pool. We speak at events. We get referrals. So those are probably the main sources of our buyer database.
Yep. So just using a lot of inbound marketing tactics and other general marketing tactics and building up a database of potential buyers, but just very specific for your business. Perrin, did you have any follow-ups on anything maybe we've missed so far?
No, I think you got it. I'm learning a lot.
Yeah. No, Jock, you've shared a lot of really awesome things here. Before we let you go, maybe we'll give you a chance to mention anything that maybe you think we should have covered that we didn't in regards to buying or selling websites.
I think we gave a good whack at it.
Yeah.
I think probably the main thing is having the mindset that it's not like you can find something in a weekend, unless if you want to spend $1,000.
Sure.
If you look at your capital and you think of it as, if you think of it, I'm trying to give you an analogy from the stock market, but basically, like, if you make a bad deal, to get that capital back takes a lot of time and hard work. So you want to make sure you sit on that nest of, like your basket of eggs per se, which is your capital, and make sure when you allocate it, you're allocating it and you're going to have a win. So you want to look at all the downsides of doing a deal first before you even think about making an offer. And then you want to be able to mitigate those downsides, whether that's through not even doing the deal or whether that's through having specific terms in the offer sheet that mitigate that risk. So, like, you don't want to be using your capital and putting it at risk basically without what's the word? Just look after it. Look after your money. That's the main thing I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly smart business, but good words of wisdom for people that are really excited to buy a site. They need to realize they need to have some patience, take a step back, look at the long-term game. Where are they going to get the most bang for their buck? And that's going to be making a really smart decision. You mentioned that you're going to make a lot of your money when you're actually buying the property itself. So you need to make sure you get the best deal possible. But once again, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. We've covered a lot of really awesome information in regards to buying and selling websites. Where can people follow along with you and stay in touch with you if they want to do that?
Sure. Digitalexits.com. We've got a whole heap of guides and checklists and all sorts of information about the buying and selling process. And if you also want to check out the Digital Exits podcast, both on our site and on iTunes, we go into a heap more depth on the buying and selling process as well.
Awesome. So Great. People can check that out. Definitely recommend that, digitalexits.com, and, of course, the podcast there. Once again, thank you, Jock. And
yeah, thank you.
Yep, and everybody listening in, just best of luck in your business. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, guys. It was a pleasure.
Yep, we'll see you. Bye-bye.